Alrighty, well, hello everyone, and welcome all. I forgot to open up this thing on YouTube before we started, but that's okay. I'll do it in a minute. All right. Hello. Today we are continuing with our book, Did Man Get Here by Evolution or by Creation, which was published in 1967, which I was gifted in the broadest sense of the word. And we're going to talk about some Ape-Men. And joining us today, we have the one, the only, Dapper Dinosaur, and host and co-host, I can words, I promise, Peter.
The Ape-Man.
Welcome all. The Ape-Man.
Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because I'm
Welcome.
literally...
I am Dapper Dinosaur.
I am literally
Go
still an Ape-Man. No matter what creationists tell me.
This is accurate. I am not. I'm just a dinosaur ceratosaurus.
We have Brian Stevens and Icarus and Brandon Peters and Mackenzie Brown and Dalton and Farron Salas and Midwest Nerd. Hello all. Welcome. Okay.
Hey.
Yes. We it's fun to talk about the word ape man. It's like dachshund dog or duck bird. But nobody really says those because that would be silly. Because those are redundant.
People do say wolfhound, which is similarly redundant.
Yeah, that's strange. Very strange.
Yeah.
And so, Paul the Skeptic, hello. So yeah, we're gonna talk about the Ape-Men. Were there actually Ape-Men? Are there still Ape-Men? Will there ever be Ape-Men? Only time will tell.
There are only Ape-Men among the men. That would be my contention.
That's what the Ceratosaurus wants us to think. The Ceratosaurus in human clothes. All right, team. Are we ready? Ready to jump into the book?
I have just borrowed the book for an hour, so I'm ready to go.
Fantastic. Fantabulous. All right.
Let's do it.
Let's jump right in, folks. All right, Chapter 8, Chapitra 8. Are ape-like men our ancestors? Well, yeah. You're an ape now.
I'm sorry.
There you go.
The title is Are Ape-Like Men Our Ancestors?
So not just apes or ape men that are like apes, which I would contend probably. I've seen men today who are like apes.
Mm-hmm.
They're very hairy, some of them.
I don't ever think I've seen a man that wasn't much like an ape.
Exactly. There you go.
I think the closest one I've seen is Ken Ham.
They just keep on having those tricuspid molars. Yeah, he looks surprisingly like a panin, I gotta be honest.
Yes.
Ken Ham, it's like, I don't believe in humans having common ancestry with other apes. It's like, okay, but dude, you literally look like a chimpanzee.
Yeah.
What do you want?
I like when he says our eyes were designed to be perfect.
Link.
Wears glasses.
Someone made this morphing where they start out with a picture of Ken Ham and then end with a picture of a chimpanzee. There's almost no difference between all of the pictures in that morphing picture.
Yes, it's our mammal men, our ancestors. Andrew Cummings says, "Hello, fellow ape people." All right, quote.
Okay, but what about vertebrate men?
Evolutionists maintain that there were prehistoric men, ape-like men, that filled the gap between man and animal, but that they are now extinct. Of these, Science Newsletter of May 29, 1965 said, quote, "They, the evolutionists, see our ancestors as hairy, tailless, and a little larger than present-day gibbons. They had mobile facial muscles and no mental imminence. They were expert climbers and spent much of their lives in trees. On the ground, they could stand with a semi-upright posture. They could walk on all fours and could run on their feet. the proto-hominoids apparently did not have the power of speech. Close quote. From such descriptions, I think there should be a comma there. From such descriptions, drawings, and plaster cast figures of prehistoric men flood the literature and museums of the world. Brutish, beastly-looking ape-men and a chain leading to modern man constantly confront the observer. But how much of this chain is built on solid fact? How much of it is built on sheer speculation? Concerning this chain, evolutionist Rostand says, quote, "We are still arguing and doubtless will continue to argue for a long time about the real connection among all these forms. Did man descend from an ape resembling the anthropoids we know today, or from an inferior ape, or even from a primate which did not as yet deserve the name of ape?" Close quote. Okay. I mean, aside from like they lacked mental eminence, I'm not sure I disagree with much of that description.
Well, the thing is, I don't know what lacking mental eminence really means.
I don't really know either. But yeah, they weren't like they didn't have the ability to do philosophy to the same extent as we do today. Like, most cultures don't do that. So
yeah, that's you have to be a certain level of like having leisure time in your culture. Like, it usually is going to require a certain degree of like division of labor so that you can have people who don't have to have their primary labor being generating the calories that you need to not starve as a society. Because the thing is, for most of the existence of all animals, everyone's full-time job, whether you're in a social species or not, is I need to get enough calories for me and potentially like my offspring, depending on species.
Mm-hmm.
And if I don't spend all of my time doing that, somebody starves to death. Whereas only recently in human history has there been this idea that you could have a group of humans who don't directly produce calories and do other things like making pottery or specializing in like carpentry, or even more absurdly, spending their time lounging around philosophizing. Like, that's a very recent advent of human society.
Producing YouTube streams. Let's not forget that one.
YouTube streams. I did a video.
Directly give calories to anyone.
No,
I did a video not too long ago titled "The Cro-Magnon's Tale," which so far is the most watched video in the Ancestor's Tale series, and I'm not entirely sure why. But the thing about
Everyone just thinks it's about filet mignon.
Could be. They're like, how to make a filet mignon. Wait a minute, he's talking about archaeology. Dang it, fooled again. But the question that the video is based on is, what is modern behavior? What does that mean? Because the Cro-Magnons are like the direct ancestors of like the so-called modern, humans, even though they were anatomically modern humans, but they weren't behaviorally modern humans. And so the question becomes, well, what the heck does behaviorally modern mean? And that depends on who you ask. If you ask, an archaeologist who specializes in like, Southeast Asian culture versus one who specializes in like, European culture versus African or South American or whatever, you get a different answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because they come up with different like tool industries and different ways to make art and all sorts of stuff. So it's like, what does it mean to be behaviorally modern? Does it mean you have to be able to send emails? Well, there are lots of people in the world who don't do that. So does that mean they're not behaviorally modern? What does it mean? Does it mean you have to be able to make nets or pottery, or what specifically?
I'm going to steal that because Kent Hovind can't send an email. So
fair enough. His computer isn't evolving. Yeah,
that's
right. But the funny thing is in the video,
yeah, he does rely on his secretaries for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The funny thing is in the Cro-Magnon's tale, I just kind of shrug at the end and go like, no one seems to know. There are like things that define us as humans, like hyper prosociality and very high capacity for like learned behavior relative to like other primates. But nothing is like, oh, we're unique in this. It's really just we take this thing, which is in all primates, and carry it to an extreme. basically.
Mm-hmm.
Which I mean is unique in and of itself, right? Because they're not doing it to the same extent we are, so that's unique in a way. But it's not. It's a matter of degrees, not types. And so at the end, I just kind of go, well, no one really knows what modern behavior is. It depends on who you ask. So
it would be fun to just start with the ability to make tools. So that would already include
gorillas,
chimps,
orangutans.
Exactly.
Right, I'm going to go with the ability to.
That would be really fun.
I'm going to go with it's the ability to make chicken sandwiches. Because that's a pretty high-tech kind of a thing, is chicken sandwiches. You ever see that video with the guy who tried to make a chicken sandwich from scratch, and it cost him like $12,000?
No, I haven't. Good Lord.
Yeah.
But yeah, having to like grind the flour and everything.
It was to show like how crazy modern tech is, because he started with growing the flour and growing chickens from eggs, and he started growing his own tomatoes, and he went to the ocean to go collect a bucket of ocean water to evaporate to make his salt for the chicken.
Oh my gosh.
Like, yeah, it was like when all was said and done, he spent like $12,000 to make an okay-ish chicken sandwich.
That's hilarious.
But he made it from scratch, gosh darn it.
I mean, that's true. No one can take that from him. So the proto-hominoids...
Well, it was a whole demonstration about like, hey, modern society is crazy amazing.
That's true. Apparently there was a Kentucky flood that killed 3 people. Maybe they should have gotten on the ark. No.
There.
All right.
I mean, it's not that they don't have the ability to get on one. There is one there.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they're in Kentucky with the ark. They should.
Yeah. Granted, that one did suffer water damage after a flood, and
right,
and the insurance company didn't pay because it was an act of God after all. Which
to be fair though, the ark structure itself didn't suffer damage. There was a driving path that was flooded out and washed out, and that was what suffered damage. So, it wasn't the actual ark structure. But also, I thought that humans couldn't be killed except in the final stages of a flood because they could do things like run uphill.
Yeah, or maybe
you're right.
Or maybe get into one of their own boats, which they had at the time, and no one thought of it.
Nobody had fishing culture
basically
until after the ark.
Yeah, according to AIG, I mean, humans should basically be immune to all floods that aren't global. But then again, I guess we're not here to talk about AIG too much.
Yeah, I mean, we always mention them a little bit, but the proto-hominoids apparently did not have the power of speech. Not modern speech, certainly. That was... I'm not even sure I would agree that, like, Homo erectus had, like, the capacity for modern speech. That was probably more recent than that.
So that's a similarly complicated question to what is modern behavior.
That's true.
Because
it is,
the thing
absolutely.
is, like...
I'd be surprised.
For one thing, like, it's very hard to find...
surprised.
It's very hard to find universals in human grammar, for one thing. And for another, like, all extant human groups have a language that can be reasonably termed so, except for, like, you occasionally get, like, feral children who just didn't grow up with humans. But even in cases where humans grow up without any language, if they grow up in a group, they tend to invent one pretty quickly. Famously, I think it was in Brazil, but a sign language developed de novo among a group of deaf children who had no contact with any language.
And there's also
linguists
twins
had to be brought in to learn their sign language.
There's also twins that tend to make up their own language while growing up to be able to communicate, and the parents won't understand them. And some will carry on doing that
and also
for a longer period in life where they can just fuck with the parents.
And also, humans with pretty severe like brain damage and deformities can still in many cases speak. So like how much like a modern brain do you have to have that capacity?
Sure.
I don't know. So it's one of those things where it's like you can't really assess the language capacity of ancient hominins unless you have an example handy that's alive. And unfortunately, we don't. So
like,
so could Homo erectus speak? I don't know.
Right. We have no idea what capacity it had, and it's almost certainly, I mean, as like all other primates, made some sorts of noises. But would it be like the semantics that we now use? I don't know. From what I've read, there's even debate over whether or not like Neanderthals were capable of the same of like language to the same degree, and they're using a lot of proxies even to argue for that. But again, we don't really know. So, could be, or maybe not be. Who knows?
It also
you have to
seems
go back and ask them.
Overall, speech is one of the.
It also seems to be a problem because it's not just one gradient. You're looking at different species. You have several gradients leading to what we call modern day speech. So where's your point of reference when it's becoming modern speech? That's going to be difficult, and you'll have to do that for several species or even populations.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And since we have no data to work with, it's going to be a tough one.
Oh, Peter, it turned out Ida should have been the first picture.
That's no problem.
I made a mistake. Okay, I'm sorry.
No problem.
It'll be in a minute though. Okay. Prehistoric men. Blah, 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 blah. How much of this is built on solid fact? Rostand, who was the dude earlier who was arguing, I think it was Rostand was. I think it was the guy who studies like frog metamorphosis. So not exactly a biological anthropologist.
But as we all know from GeneSyn, if a frog egg can turn into a tadpole and eventually into a frog, then you can have the kinds diversify from the ark because ontogenetic sequences and phylogenetic sequences are basically the same thing.
I mean, sold. I'm sold on it. He says, well, he does say that primatologists or anthropologists are arguing about the connection among the different fossils. Well, sure. That happens. That's true of literally any group of fossils. Fossils are typically incomplete. And so figuring out where they go with relation to other things isn't always easy. Even when we have complete fossils, it's not always easy to figure out where it goes with relation to everything else.
That complaint is literally identical to the complaint scientists are doing science on fossils. Because that's what science is you present findings and then people argue with you about them. That is literally what science is.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry that science is doing science, guys. I don't know what to tell you. That's how it works.
It says, did man descend from an ape resembling the anthropoids we know today, or from an inferior ape, or from a primate that did not yet deserve the name of ape? Well, kind of all of them. Well, kind of. I assume it means from like gibbon grade because it says Anthropoidea is all catarrhines, right? Or no, sorry, catarrhines plus
no, it's hominidid. No, I thought Anthropoidea. Oh wait,
Anthropoidea.
Yeah, you're right. Because it's simiforms.
Catarrhini plus Platyrini. So
I'm thinking hominoidea. So yeah, it's all monkeys.
It would have to.
So it's definitely a monkey
descended from anthropoids. Right. You're right.
Yeah,
right.
But more specifically, I mean, look, the common ancestor of like chimpanzees and humans is within crown homininidae. It's an ape. 100%. It's in the great ape group.
Right, exactly.
You have to go back before the common ancestor with humans and other apes to get to non-ape ancestors.
Right, exactly. Same from an inferior ape. I assume it means like gibbon grade, I guess, or the lesser apes. Which again, we would have had to pass through a phase where in which the apes were smaller than the modern great apes, and we do know of quite a few fossils in that area, like Akimbo and Australopithecus and Proconsul, all those guys. So yeah, again, and I guess we'll point that out on the next page, or the next page, whatever. All right, all right, ready?
Yep.
Anything else to add? We ready for the next section?
Already.
Ready as I'll ever be.
Okay. Quote. Why is there such difficulty? New Scientist of March 25th, 1965. points out, quote, one of the prime difficulties is that really significant human fossil skulls are exceptionally rare. Everything which has been found to date could be tucked away in a large coffin. All the rest must be referred to something else. Close quote. The following comment in Scientific American of June 1956 also bears this out. Quote, primatologists may therefore be forgiven their fumblings over great gaps of millions of years from which we do not possess a single complete monkey skeleton, let alone the skeleton of a human forerunner. We have to read the story of primate evolution from a few handfuls of broken bones and teeth. Those fossils, moreover, are from places thousands of miles apart on the old world landmass. In the end, we may shake our heads baffled. It is as though we stood at the heart of a maze and no longer remember how we had come there, close quote. An additional difficulty is noted in Evolution as a Process, edited by evolutionist Julian Huxley. We read, quote, in the great majority of cases, the descriptions of the specimens that have been provided by their discoverers have been so turned as to indicate that the fossils in question have some special place or significance in the line of direct human descent as opposed to that of the family of apes. It is unlikely that they could all enjoy this distinction. In the case of primate evolution, the inferences are sometimes very insecurely based because of inadequacies of the evidence, close quote. We'll stop there. One of the prime difficulties...
like that the...
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I do like that the persistence of the argument, oh, look, all of our human ancestors, alleged human ancestor remains could fit in name relatively small volume container. Like, that's still a thing, although we've upgraded from a coffin to a truck bed recently. But, like, one of the points I've made in the video is, like, hey, guess what no paleontologist has ever cared about? The total volume of all fossil specimens of a particular taxon. Like, how many gallons worth of hominin fossils do we have? Who cares?
Yeah.
It's not a relevant factor.
Yeah, Kent Hovind loves to use this argument, and look, we can find it all the way back in 1967. But yeah, you're right. It's stupid. It's so irrelevant to anything.
Yep.
Oh, they don't fill up every floor of a skyscraper. Like, okay, I guess. But like, why does it matter?
Yeah, let's figure out how many cubic centimeters of fossil we have of hominins. This will be a valuable exercise that I'm sure will be groundbreaking research.
Right. Yeah, it's silly.
Well, you have to grasp at straws if we even have fossils that disprove what you think is creation, then everything is going to be a problem. So the smaller you can make the problem, the better it would be. And that's what it's grasping at straws. It's literally what it is. Because and this is famous. Every paleontologist has said this. Once we find a transitional species, they will just shout, okay, now we've got 2 more gaps. It's
Dr.
Banjo. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It is just a dishonesty that they need to go to in order to hang on to their current beliefs. That's all it is.
It's like Tiktaalik is only a foot long, therefore it doesn't count as a transitional fossil.
Man, I guess the fossil record of things like rodents and shrews is completely unknown because of the low volume of those fossils in general.
Except for like freaking Ceratogalus, like what the heck?
Well, that one is just put there by Satan to test your faith.
Fair enough. You got me there.
He's got horns.
He does have horns. Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point.
A rat with horns is clearly of the devil.
Or Phoberomes or Josephus Artigacea or one of the other like giant caviomorphs.
But those aren't rats. Those are caviomorphs.
What did you say? Rodents or you said rodents, rats, or?
I thought I said rats, but maybe I said rodents.
Whatever. Anyway, yeah. Rats, murines are all. Yep. No fossil record of murines. Doesn't exist. Peter, can you pull out this specimen known as Ida, please?
Yes.
So while not a monkey, she's not a monkey. she is a more closely related to the lemurs, galagos, and what is it? Lemurs,
Bush
galagos,
babies?
and bush babies. Yeah. I was trying to remember. It's like 3 different groups. So she's more closely related to that group than to the actual monkeys. But that's a pretty near complete skeleton. That's like it's pretty well over like.
Pretty
50%.
sure it's essentially complete. I don't know that there's any complete bone that's actually just gone from the skeleton.
Yeah, so this is from Mesolpit, which is in Germany, and it's a really, really cool fossil site because these organisms would basically fall in these lakes and they would sink to the bottom where it's like anaerobic, and then nothing would degrade them and they would leave these beautiful impressions. And so Itis from there, Darwinius massillae. So it says we do not possess. Well, it does say we do not possess a single complete monkey skeleton, but while she's not a monkey, she is a primate, and well, there you go.
We said it off air, but I think it bears repeating on air. A lot of the arguments from this are just missing the word "yet," and in the intervening time, it's like, yeah, okay, exactly. We didn't have it then, but science progresses, and it's one of those things where it's ultimately an argument from ignorance, right? Hey, if we don't currently have the fossils, then that is an argument against the transition, which isn't true. Especially when we have animals like primates who are very much associated with things like forests, and forests are notoriously bad for fossilization. Basically, the speed at which things decay and like to nothing in forests is much higher than in many other environments where fossils are more common, like eutrophic lakes or deserts or steppes and things like that, right? These are all much better for fossilization in general.
Right.
Whereas forests are just some of the worst environments for fossilization. So unsurprisingly, we don't have a lot of fossil animals that lived in forests. And that is throughout the entire fossil record. Like, we don't have a lot of forest dinosaurs. We know there were forests. But what was in them in the Mesozoic? I don't know.
Yeah, and even like the ones where there are like forest deposits, it's like predominantly just like the leaves, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Because trees are just like dropping leaves every year.
Leaves,
and so you get these big
pollen.
Right, you get these big pileups of like plant material, but very, very few organisms.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where unfortunately humans just happen to come from a lineage where we don't actually expect an amazing fossil record. However, because apparently some of the earliest human ancestors after the split with the other Great Lakes quickly went into semi-arid plains, we actually do have a pretty good fossil record for that group of apes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where there's chimpanzees and gorillas, we got basically nothing.
Yeah. Yep. Big sad.
But hey, orangutans, we got something there.
Yeah, we do. We'll talk about that. In a little bit, because orangutans, they hit the jackpot.
Yay!
So yeah, we have to read the story of primate evolution from a few handfuls of broken bones and teeth. And sure, in 1967, there probably weren't a whole bunch of primate fossils at the time, but now we have a bunch more, and we'll show you that we have a bunch more. This is also, and so the little quotation from evolution as a process I thought was kind of interesting because paleoanthropologists kind of have a reputation as being like, aha, I found the human ancestor.
Yeah.
They're kind of notorious for that, and it may be and that may not be entirely fair. That may be over just like a
it's
cliche
kind of
or
like
something.
the cliche of dinosaur paleontologists naming a new genus for literally anything.
Yeah, it may be a cliche, but like they are they do sort of have that title. So, and they will actually talk about in a little bit some of the fossils which were considered to be human ancestors, but which are no longer considered human ancestors, and that's fine. Our data updates, it gets better, and we change our conclusions with the evidence. So what do you want?
Mm-hmm.
What apparently they would prefer is that science not be done on the topic. That's literally what they would want.
I mean, basically, they're like, no, go home, stop it, go away.
Yeah, we already know the answer. Don't bother investigating.
All right. We ready for the next page?
Yep.
I sure am.
Quote, However, evolutionists do generally agree now that man and the ape family branched off from a common ancestor. Well, yeah, we're in the ape family, so sure. What is the fossil evidence for this common ancestor? New Scientist stated in 1965, quote, the unmistakable correspondence between man and anthropoids points clearly to a common ancestor, but it has not yet been found, and we may have some difficulty in recognizing it. So while evolutionists claim that man must have come from an ape-like beast, the common ancestor of both man and ape, the evidence is simply not there. The conclusion is without supporting facts, as the Saturday Evening Post, famed scientific organization, the Saturday Evening Post.
I wonder who's on their peer review staff.
December 3rd, 1966 verified, quote, investigators have yet to trace the origins of the human line, close quote. Is there any evidence of the early steps that supposedly came after this common ancestor? The evolutionary writers of the 1965 book, The Primates, admitted, quote, unfortunately, the early stages of man's evolution progress along his individual, of man's evolutionary progress along his evolutionary line remain a total mystery, close quote. And Scientific American of November 1966 said, quote, the nature of the line leading to living man remains a matter of pure theory, close quote. Is the evidence more solid as we advance up the proposed chain? From a conference of prominent anthropologists that met in 1965, a timetable emerged. A diagram and an article based on this was published in the New York Times of April 11, 1965. It said, quote, even today, surprisingly little is known of man's own family tree. There are still enormous gaps, close quote. However, it began the fossil evidence. That's a weird statement. It began the fossil evidence by saying, quote, at least 30 million years ago, the features that distinguish man from all other animals had begun to emerge. 30 million years ago. The first specimen put in the chart was called Pliopithecus, a gibbon-like creature, fragments of which have been found in Egypt. Okay. All right. Let's talk about this.
Okay.
So, I'm not terribly familiar with the history of paleoanthropology. I don't know if you guys are, so I don't know what specific hominins or anthropoids or primate fossils in general were known by this time. I can't imagine it was a whole lot. So it says investigators have yet to trace the origins of the human line. Well, by human line, I guess it means just within the past 6 million years, as in our branch from our common ancestor with chimps.
Well, at the time, the time frame of the split with other apes and humans was not well established, and it was also common at this time in the 60s and even into the 70s to think that humans were basically the sister group to all other hominids, which is one of the reasons why at the time, actually even all the way into the 90s, people were still using Pongidae as a separate family from Homininidae, which only included what we now think of as hominins. So I think what they're going with here is that the consensus at the time, sorry about that, seemed to indicate that humans, broadly defined, split before the other apes. And this was based on things like, the other apes all tend to not be so bipedal. They tend to all be hairy. And the thing is that at this point, you're using plesiomorphies to identify a group instead of synapomorphies, which is one of the reasons why it fell apart. But you can kind of see why, at the time, without a lot of information about the evolutionary history of Hominidae, there was a reasonable assumption that humans were essentially basically branching to all other apes, which is one of the reasons why they talk about the common ancestor of apes on the one hand and humans, even though we know that that's not really so much of a thing, because the common ancestor between humans and chimpanzees comes before the common ancestor between chimpanzees and gorillas. Or more recently, sorry, not before. That's what I meant.
Right. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. I did not know that. So that was really neat.
Yeah, actually, if you look at a lot of really old, attempts at cladograms for the apes, including humans, you find humans branching off first.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Also, Australopithecus afarensis was known at the time, but only from very fragmentary remains. It wouldn't be until the 70s that the first significant remains that identified it as a likely hominin were discovered. So at this point, basically they knew about Neanderthals, and I'm sure that we'll get to things like Piltdown Man and Nebraska Man.
No, not from creationists. They would never.
Who could imagine such a thing? So yeah, we didn't have most of the sub-Saharan hominins that we now have, but we did have some evidence of things like some Homo erectus outside of Africa and Homo neanderthalensis. So those were the well-known supposed Ape-Men, if you will.
Okay, and there are quite a few differences because Neanderthals are more closely related to us, of course, and we both are descended from Homo erectus or Ergaster, whichever terminology you prefer on using. So that makes sense. That they would see like these kind of big gaps, like some fragmentary sort of early Australopiths, Homo erectus, and then like kind of us. And it's like, where is the line?
At the time it was a substantial gap. But the thing is, just like Peter said, we got the Dr. Banjo response is as we filled in all of the gaps, it was just, haha, I've got you now for where is the gap between these two? Right. And eventually it's just like, bro, there's not going to be a completely smooth gradient because that's not how the fossil record works. But like pick a morphology, we've probably got a fossil for it. Like there's a fossil group of hominins for any brain case size you want to name. We've got, pretty much the entire transition from sort of basal diverging big toe all the way to inline big toe pretty early on. I mean, we've got a whole lot of variety in the shoulder girdle going towards modern human conditions. We've got differences in things like lumbar lordosis going from things like, what is it? Australopithecus, not Australopithecus sediba. Now I can't remember, but like we've got a lot of variation in like the degree of lumbar lordosis going from some of the earliest hominins into Australopithecus and then Homo. We've got changes in the shape of the jaw going from squarish, rectangular to parabolic. Like you can see Australopithecus, which still has a fairly squared off jawline, but it's clearly less squared and more parabolic than that of say a chimpanzee or other hominids. Like it's all there, but yes, if you want to call a gap of like, this group and this other group, there's a little like 20 cc range where their brain case sizes don't overlap. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, I guess. I don't know how significant that's supposed to be.
We in fact had a discussion with someone once regarding that very thing, and it kind of comes down to like, okay, well, the molar size of this one ape is maybe a millimeter or so larger than this other one. Like you can say there's a gap there, but like it's a millimeter. I'm pretty sure that falls within like the normal range, the normal variation within a single species.
Well, the thing is that like these are people who think that you can get all canids from one pair of canines, but then you're like, okay, well this ape that you think is an ape is millimeters away from the morphology of this particular animal that you think is a human. So that's way less than the difference between, say, a red fox and a gray wolf. But you think that's a bridgeable gap. So what gives? And the answer is, I have an emotional commitment to humans not being descended from other primates and non-humans in general. So it doesn't matter how small the quote-unquote gaps are. I'm just going to declare, for arbitrary reasons, that the gaps are insurmountable, and there are obviously two groups.
Yeah.
I don't know who said it first, but someone pointed it out that the moment you have several creationists pointing out that this skull is either human and another creationist saying it is fully ape, that means you've got a transitional. That's a good indication that you've got a transitional fossil, because even if they can come to a consensus whether or not it's an ape or a human, has to be transitional.
Yeah, creationists notoriously cannot figure out which hominids count as human. Which, to be fair, Neither can scientists, because human isn't well defined. But
right, yeah, absolutely, yeah. The we also have, fun fact, like microevolutionary changes within certain hominin species, like with Paranthropus. There was a study that came out a couple years ago on like they became. You can find that like the earlier forms are slightly more graceful and the later forms are slightly more robust. So that was kind of neat. So yeah, so in that conversation, because we talked with Paleologos about that, and one of the things we discussed was, even if we had a perfect fossil record, there's still no guarantee that you would see like perfect gradients with everything, because there aren't perfect gradients in nature, right? Like in a lot of
generations
cases,
themselves are not a gradient, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think I gave the example of like butterflies that give birth to offspring that have slightly different color patterns, but like it's not going to be like a little bit change and then a little bit change and a little bit change. In a lot of cases, you actually have these fairly radical changes between like parent to offspring, because it's a few genetic loci, and if you mutate one of those, that's going to cause a pretty radical change in the color pattern. And so like there's no gradient there. It just gave birth to a juvenile that had a pretty different color.
Yeah.
Like how
or
was
even
it
in
created,
like,
you know,
if you go into like humans or something, if your offspring has a mutation that gives its like changes the angle of the parabola in the upper jaw by like 4 degrees, well, guess what? You don't have the 1, 2, 3 degrees. But I mean, is that a radical, unprecedented type of morphological change as a result of mutation? I don't think so. It seems like it's pretty reasonable, but are you going to get the gradient? No, not really. So I think at this point, the hominin fossil record is about as complete as anyone could reasonably ask for, which is one of the reasons why I don't think the young Earth creationists are being reasonable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yep. Is there any evidence of the early steps that supposedly came after this common ancestor? Well, so I guess we should point out. So, if you guys haven't seen my Ancestors Tales series, or if you haven't seen Dapper and my series where we go through the history of life, you should check those out, because humans, us, Homo sapiens, not Dapper because he's a ceratosaur, we, our closest extant relatives are, or is the genus Pan. So Paniscus, the bonobos, and Pan troglodytes, the common chimpanzees. Although Pan Paniscus, even though they're called the pygmy chimpanzees, they aren't actually smaller compared to common chimpanzees, but that's beside the point.
They're not shorter. They do have a lower average body weight.
Yeah. They're not shorter. Yeah. And so they're our closest extant relatives. Then the next is the few species of gorilla, and then the few species of orangutan, and then the bunch of species of gibbons.
Yep.
And then you have
you have the Cercopithecids.
Yep, the Sarcopithecus, you have which are all the old world monkeys. So today it's just are there any European monkeys, or is it all just Asia and Africa?
How do you count the Barbary Islands?
Fair enough. So all old. So Europe, Asia, Africa. Those are the old world monkeys, and then beyond that you have the New World monkeys. So that's Central and South America, and then you have the tarsiers, which are these strange little nocturnal primates with giant eyes, which are like Southeast Asia and the Philippines. And then out from that, the next extant group is your lemurs, galagos, and bush babies. And so those are all the extant primates.
I do have to mention, because in Europe there is a famous species that is actually really important, which are the baboons that live on Gibraltar, which is in Europe.
Oh, okay.
And so, and they are very important, because the moment the last one leaves the rock, that is where the Brits are going to give Gibraltar back to the Spanish. That is the urban legend or whatever you can take it, but that's something that always still comes up.
Time for a breeding program.
Yeah,
that's pretty funny.
I think the British might have a good conservation program installed to make sure that they're not going to leave the rock.
And do the Spanish have like snipers established to kill as many as possible?
No, not yet. Surprisingly, you would think they would, but yeah, not yet.
Yeah, because Spain is still not happy about the idea that Great Britain is in de facto control of Gibraltar. They're still like, I think that's technically us. And Great Britain's like, okay, I don't care.
They said, go and take it. Go on. Right. Go ahead. Take it.
And they've got the perfect mechanism installed. We've got the baboons there. As long as they're there, it's ours. They decide.
Right.
They have to leave on their own. No snipers allowed.
It is the case that generally Europe has basically no non-human primates.
Right.
Although there is a feral population of rheas in Germany, which is unusual.
Aren't there also like wild parrots that like live in Paris and they like migrate around? I remember reading
also
about
Spain now has an urban raccoon problem.
I believe it.
In the Netherlands, we also have, and I forgot the name. So the golden colored monkeys with the white faces, long tails. I don't know exactly. It's
golden lion tamarins. Are they New World monkeys or Old World monkeys?
Old World, I think. I'm not entirely sure. So we had a
like a langer or a colobus monkey or something.
We had a kind of a zoo that only had apes and monkeys, and then there was a fire, and all of this type of monkey got out.
Oh no!
And they have survived in nature. So if you ever are in the Netherlands,
monkeys are adaptable.
Yeah, if you're ever in the Netherlands near the city of Apeldoorn, that's where you can observe them in nature, and they're wreaking havoc in people's gardens. So
yeah.
Isn't there like an island that has like monkeys that all have AIDS or something like that?
No, you're thinking of the chlamydia, hepatitis C, macaques in Florida, I think.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah.
And they are no longer confined to an island. They are now on the Floridian mainland.
Oh, that's wonderful. Great.
Yeah. And also, conservation efforts directed towards eliminating the population have faced severe public backlash because the locals really like the monkeys. Because
of course they do. It's
from
Florida.
afar, they're charismatic, and also it's Florida. So like, it's politically not very tenable to go like and call the macaques from Florida.
Go in there with your flamethrowers and just take out the island.
Yeah, and almost a very large percentage of them have hepatitis C, which is very dangerous for humans, but is usually asymptomatic in the macaques. Which I don't know why humans would be susceptible to various monkey diseases if there's no common ancestry.
Yeah, no, it's crazy stuff. There is also, and I did first learn about this from Arn, there's a tarantula in Australia whose venom is highly toxic to primates.
Sydney funnel web.
Yeah, just across the board, like all primates and also humans.
Yeah, weird.
Huh. How strange is that? Very weird.
That's just how God made it.
Dalton says, politically not great to eliminate them from Florida because the state's government is run by them.
There you go. Yeah. Well, yeah, when your state legislature is a bunch of macaques who all have hepatitis.
Yeah. All right, we ready to move on to the next part?
I just wanted to point out one more thing, and you laughed when you read it out. So one of their sources is the Saturday Evening Post, one of the as we know, well-established scientific institutions. That is something that is still going on these days. If you watch any debate with Kent Hovind, he will have similar links as his sources. The only difference is then this would actually confirm that we're devolving, according to Kent Hovind. The links that they put up here are, when the book was written, fairly recent. It's just a few years back in time. Whereas Hovind seems to be stuck because he will have links that go back over 100 years, and he still thinks it's relevant. So you have to point out that these people at least tried to be a little more honest and have the more recent posts that they've seen that seems to confirm their bias. Whereas Hovind is...
I think I have an idea that unifies both of these phenomena. And it's this, right? Willing to cite recent work if they think it helps their case.
Mm-hmm.
But the minute a field of research goes into the realm where it's absolutely devastating to their ideas, they stop citing newer work at the point right before that happened.
Yeah.
So that's why we get, like 150-year-old geology and, like 60-year-old paleontology. Whereas if you went back 60 years ago, they were more comfortable with more recent paleontology because it just hadn't become quite as devastating.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
So basically, what you're saying,
to Peter's
Dapper, is that science is progressing. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying?
But once it progresses too far, once it progresses too far, though, then the creationists are like, nope, we no longer like this science. Well, we gotta stop keeping up.
I said Peter's point, when in the very first episode of this, we pointed out how few of their citations are actually scientific. And in fairness to them, it was a lot harder in this time to get scientific papers, but at the same time, they could have cited scientific papers.
Mm-hmm.
They could have gone to the library and found relevant stuff instead of citing newspapers and things. But most of their citations,
impossible to get scientific citations at the time.
Right.
Scientists were doing it all the time.
Because exactly. And they cite a few things here and there. I actually have one of the books they cited on my shelf over there.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, yeah, they could have used this more often, but they just kind of opted not to because it didn't fit their bias.
Mm-hmm.
I do also want to say JG saying, isn't hepatitis C Florida's state bird?
That actually makes me wonder, what is Florida's state bird?
Probably the whooping crane or something like that, because they put a lot of money and effort into preserving those.
The northern mockingbird.
Don't they have a state ape, aka Florida man? Because I see him on social media a lot.
All right, we ready?
Yeah.
All right. Quote, what was the next step listed? The Times reported, quote, a further step was the appearance, some 19 million years ago, of a genus with certain tooth features typical of man and the great apes, close quote. This was called Dryopithecus, found in Africa and Eurasia. So from Pro-Pliopithecus, about 30 million BCE, to Dryopithecus, about 19 million BCE, there's a gigantic gap of about 11 million years in which there is no evidence. The Times also said that after the disappearance of Dryopithecus, quote, some 9 million years ago, the record is blank for 7 million years. What does all of this show so far? First of all, the facts in support of the claim that there was a common ancestor of man and apes are missing. Then the supposed early record of untold millions of years in man's line is a total blank. Finally, from when the first evidence is said to have appeared about 30 million years ago, until now, there are gaps amounting to 18 million years. Most of the chain from the assumed common ancestor to modern man is blank. There are no facts. It is little wonder that Scientific American stated in July 1964, quote, pending additional discoveries, it may be wiser not to insist that the transition from ape to man is now being documented from the fossil record, close quote.
I mean, that might be a fair thing, but guess what? That's one of those other yet things. The fossil record is not yet being documented.
Yes. Yet this fossil evidence, in fact, the very next word, yet this fossil evidence just presented is even more feeble. How so? Because some evolutionists put Pro-Pliopithecus not in man's line, but in a line leading to the gibbons, and they put Dryopithecus in another line that leads to the apes. They believe that the oldest creature in man's line is the one called Ramapithecus. The Times said of this, quote, midway through the lifetime of Dryopithecus, about 12 million years ago, ape-like creatures with almost human faces appeared, close appeared. This was the genus Ramapithecus found in the Siwalik Hills of northwest India, close quote. Of course, this would mean that an even larger gap from it back to that supposed common ancestor of man and ape. Hold on a second. 19 million years ago, midway is about 12 million years ago, there is an even larger gap from it back to the supposed common ancestor of man and ape. I don't understand that. Okay, close quote. All right, let's discuss this because I'm confused. Am I misunderstanding this math? Because he said Dryopithecus was the next one to us, right? And he said that was 19 million years ago. But then Ramapithecus is 12 million years ago. But this would mean an even larger gap from it back to the supposed common ancestor of man and ape.
Yeah, I don't
understand that. I don't get it.
Yeah, that doesn't track with me.
I don't get the math on that. Anyway, all right. So they're citing some actual fossils now. They're citing Propliopithecus from 30 million years ago, Dryopithecus from 19 million years ago, and Ramapithecus from 12 million years ago. Peter, would you mind putting up the first phylogeny, please?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in one sense, we can forgive them because, again, they didn't have access to all these fossils. That's fine. It's all well and good. But we do now. And creationists are still using arguments like this today. So let's set the record straight. So the Paleocene was it 66 to 56 million years ago, right, Dapper?
I believe so, but that's not numbers that I usually just carry in my head. So double check, everybody.
All right, well, let's look it up right now. I believe it is. So Paleocene, and that's 66 to 56. So then the Eocene is
I'm more into the Mesozoic.
Yep. Eocene is 56 to 34 million years, and then Oligocene is 34 to 23, and then I think the Miocene is 23 to 5, I believe. So, okay. All right, so I think that's right. I think it's Miocene is 23 to 5. Yes, okay. All right, so the relevant time that it's referring to, so Propliopithecus about 30 million years ago, so that's in the Oligocene. But if you look right there, it says there's a gap from 30 million years, so that's in the Oligocene, to 19 million years, so that's in the Miocene. But as you can see, there's a whole bunch of primates that populate that area right now, or that we are now aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the Adapiformes, which are related to the strepsirrhines. They're basal strepsirrhines. Or I guess paraphyletic to the modern strepsirrhines.
It does seem like strepsirrhines are included in coming out of Adapiformes.
Yeah.
Gosh darn it, guys. Stop it with the paraphyletic names. Pancrustacea. Bullshit.
Then on the haplorhine side, we have the Omomyiformes, which span most of that, span everywhere from like the start of the Eocene to the early Miocene. So they definitely are in that time frame, and they're sister to the rest of the haplorhines. Looks like we have Altiatlaceus, which is sort of near the common ancestor of tarsiers and the anthropoids. And then we have a bunch of stem anthropoids. We have looks like Eosimiidae is also paraphyletic. You have Amphipithecidae. We have Proteopithecidae. Proteopithecidae, Parapithecoidea, and Oligopithecidae, all of which are somewhere along the line as early anthropoids. And then we have early catarrhines. Oh, this picture is a little outdated. It's picture's a little outdated because platyrrhines actually go back, I believe, to the Oligocene. So, a little outdated. But regardless, so as you can see, we do have primates spanning this gap. We have fossil primates of a bunch of different groups spanning the gap, the so-called gap that he cites there.
Yep. All the way from the Eocene to modern day, essentially.
Yep. Yeah, very, very late Paleocene there. So there's no gap anymore in that sense. That gap is gone. And if you could switch to the other one, please, Peter. So this one's starting 20 million years ago. So this one's starting in the Miocene and progressing to today. And again, just look at that. We have apes pretty much spanning that entire time period. Or really.
Jackson, I see question marks. So the whole thing is worthless now.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, so we have apes spanning this entire time period. So again, there just aren't gaps. There's no time period here in which there were not like apes alive. And so this is from 20 million years ago to today. So yeah, we have the whole thing is filled in.
STEM apes, kind of.
Right. Yeah, most of those apes, STEM apes. So this claim of we just have like
just like how Pteranodon is a STEM bird.
Fired. Fired. Also, Ramapithecus. Actually, we will talk about it in a second. They're going to talk about it in a minute. Okay. We'll come back to that. We'll come back to Ramapithecus. But, so we have like Akimbo and Proconsul way down there on the bottom right. And then we have like we have the Dryopithecines, which were originally in Africa and then kind of made their way to Eurasia. And then you have a bunch of apes in Asia, and then some of them actually traveled back to Africa. And we did a video on that. That's the orangutan's tail. And it seems that the reason for that, for why we now find gibbons and orangutans in Asia, and then the other apes in Africa, is you basically had apes who were spread all across Africa, Europe, and Asia, because it was a very warm tropical time. And then you had a climatic shift where it got a lot colder and drier. And as a result of that, a lot of the forests shrank. And because the forest shrank, there were fewer places for these apes to live. And so this biogeographic gap was created, where now you just have apes restricted to sort of the equatorial regions and near equatorial regions in like Southeast Asia and then way over in Africa. Okay. What would you guys like to add? I'll leave it to you.
I don't like that hylobatids just get one bar. Like, there's a lot of diversity in there.
You're right. There are
like
even
hylobatids.
Yep.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there are even fossil hylobatids like Bunapithecus and Junzi imperialis, which is very recent. It's actually in like historic times, where we have a fossil gibbon which went extinct within the past like couple thousand years, right? So I think that's really cool. It shows it's a testament to how incomplete the fossil record is, right? Because it was so recent in time, and we just have this one little set of fossils for it.
I mean, that's within historical time. It was alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, within historical times. So, and we just have one fossil of it.
It was 2,000 years ago, when things like, the Maccabean revolt was happening in Judea, these gibbons were alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to apologize.
The only record we have of them is they were some pets in an aristocrat's own zoo, so their personal zoo. What were you saying, Peter?
I have to apologize. I didn't catch much from this part of the conversation because I had to run back to the library, return my book, then take it out again, then open it up again in the right page, and then adjusting the page again. So I was kind of busy making sure that you can read on for the next page.
You,
so I didn't catch a lot. So just a quick reminder, which page are we on right now? Because I may have shifted.
82.
82. See?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
This is why normally libraries give you more than an hour to return.
Yeah.
A
Well,
book.
this is archive.org, which only lets you like borrow the book for an hour. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Imagine if that was how like brick and mortar libraries worked. It would be useless.
Well,
get back home and be like, all right, time to go back.
In all fairness, for what we're doing here, I'm still really happy that we have the ability to borrow it, because now I can actually show it on screen, which I didn't have for the I think the first 2 episodes, until Jackson had to do an episode where he didn't bring the book and we had to bring this in.
Right.
So it's nice so people can read along, because obviously evolutionists cannot never be taken at their word. You have to check whether or not they're reading the proper text and not adding in things or leaving out things.
I mean, we do all say that in our videos.
That attitude.
Yeah, we do all say that in our videos. Like, you know, well, if you don't, you know, you want to make sure this is what's correct. Well, we cited all of our sources in the bottom, you know, the description, the down part, doobly-doo.
So, but the majority of my videos have a description that contains like upwards of 10, 12, sometimes 20 sources.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, but in this case, it's really nice to have it on screen so people can read along if possible.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, don't take my word for it. Dun-dun-dun.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Citation needed, this Dapper gift says.
Yes, that is. I'm very happy to report that is currently like I think it's like the second most popular citation needed GIF on Discord, and like the 4th most popular on Twitter.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
That's pretty crazy. Also, it has Klingon in it, which no one ever notices. It says, "I won't believe you" underneath citation needed, but it says it in Klingon.
That's pretty funny. We were just saying, Peter, while you were getting the book, that like the whole time span that this book is saying there are no fossil apes, like the entire time span is filled in with various fossil apes.
Mm-hmm.
Not all directly ancestral to humans, of course, but there are apes in that entire time period.
Which is why we're dishonest, because we keep changing what we're saying. We say that it's because new evidence has come in and we can actually present you that evidence. But according to creationists, that's dishonest. We have to stick to one thing and then don't change it, because that is how you measure truth, right? The Bible has been the same, apart from all the things that were added in, taken out, even when you go from one translation to another or one denomination to another. There are Bibles that have 88 books. There are Bibles that have 66 books. I mean, yeah.
I do want to point out, Dapper, didn't you get like a creationist like said to you recently, and I think it was in the side chat of a video, that like you'll just change your mind with new evidence? Didn't some creationist say that to you?
Yeah, I think there was something like that where it's like, what is it next? You're going to come up with new evidence and then completely change your position? And it's like, yeah, potentially, because that's what intellectual honesty is. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. How dare I change my opinion when new evidence is presented? The horror.
Right. Killer. Yeah. All right. Anything else you guys want to add? Are we ready for the next part?
I'm ready.
Okay. Quote, between Ramapithecus and the next ancestor lined up in the chain called Australopithecus, there is another huge gap. It's only 5 million years, right? Something like that. Or 8 million years, something like that.
The thing is,
probably not.
It's all relative. Like, is 8 million a huge gap? Well, I mean, it is if you're talking about like your lifetime. It's not if you're talking about like the entirety of the Cenozoic.
Fair enough.
Keep in mind, these people do think that the world is 6,000 years old, so several millions of years is huge to them.
That's true. These are incomparably long time spans.
Exactly.
Science News of January 28th, 1967 said, quote, Unfortunately, there is a 10 million year gap in the fossil record between the latest Ramapithecus and the earliest of the Australopithecus, close quote. Using the dates of these sources, the record from about 12 billion BCE to about 12 million. Did I say 12 billion? Oh, well. 12
Wait,
million.
Are we using BCE?
Yes.
This is weird.
This book uses...
That is surprising. That
YPB, years before present.
Nope, not today. We're going BCE, buddy.
Yeah, it's weird that first that a Christian book is using BCE instead of BC, but also when you're doing paleontology, you don't use BCE, you use years before present.
Or like MYA or GYA.
Yeah, million years ago. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's just bizarre.
Yeah, I didn't write it. I don't know these people. All right. Yet, what of Ramapithecus itself? The Saturday Evening Post, famed as much as nature is, stated, quote, "It probably looked something like a small chimpanzee and had the nimble hands and general agility of a monkey. The presumption is strong that Ramapithecus, the earliest known, but not the earliest, member of the family of man, was at least as ingenious as contemporary chimpanzees. We have only a fleeting glimpse of Ramapithecus, the equivalent of a few frames clipped from a feature-length motion picture," close quote. From the description of Ramapithecus that evolutionists themselves give, it is evident to the unprejudiced that this is far, far more likely a species of animal in the ape or monkey family. The claim that it belongs in the line of man is pure speculation. Indeed, some evolutionists do not accept it as being in man's line. In the book, The Fossil Evidence for Human Evolution, the evolutionist author writes, quote, "We can contrive a theoretical picture of the intermediate stages which presumably must have been interposed between generalized pongid or ape ancestors and the Australopithecus phase. But in the absence of the concrete evidence of fossil remains, this is not a very satisfying procedure," close quote. It certainly is not satisfying to see a chain of ascent described from that assumed common ancestor to the Australopithecines with nothing to support it but speculation. But why should such theorizing be accepted without supporting facts? Close quote. Okay, so let's talk about Ramapithecus. So Ramapithecus is not a direct ancestor of humans. This was thought, indeed, when it was first found, and part of the reason is its teeth, the part of the skull that was discovered, which includes the teeth, is a lot more similar to other apes, including humans, than what they were discussing earlier, like Propliopithecus and Dryopithecus. So it was a lot closer to us than they were, but it's actually a pongine. It is an orangutan relative. It's a stem orangutan. So that's what Ramapithecus is. You have a couple different groups of a couple different tribes of orangutans. You have Lufangpithecini, which is like the really basal group. Then Ramapithecini, which includes Ramapithecus as well as Gigantopithecus, the really, really massive ape. That's also in Ramapithecini. And then you have Pongini, which contains the modern orangutans, as well as, I think, Corapithecus, which is another sort of like stem orangutan, which is close to the modern orangutans, but it's not itself.
So,
within that group.
Jackson, I have a question.
Yeah. Okay.
Why is it that it seems like it can be tricky to figure out exactly which groups the most basal and earliest members of Homininidae belong to? Is that because perhaps they're only more recently derived from a common ancestor with a single morphology, and therefore they should look more similar to each other as we go back in time?
I mean, that's entirely possible, yeah.
Interesting. Are there any other lineages where we see this happening, where as we go back to the first members identifiable for the lineage, they look very similar, if not nearly identical, to the earliest members of nearby lineages, phylogenetically speaking?
I feel like that's all of them.
Yeah, good luck everyone out here trying to figure out the earliest rhinos from the earliest horses. You will fail, I promise.
Yeah.
It's almost like this is another prediction of evolution that isn't often talked about, but it's definitely true.
Yeah. That's why with things like trying to figure out what the earliest, Canidae is from the earliest, like Ursidae. That's why fossils typically aren't brought in on these things, because things start getting really messy with fossils. So they're like they'll do the what is it, cognitum? Yeah, this looks different, so it's different.
That's how you get things like goats and sheep are different kinds, even though they're literally the same thing. Like
right.
Sheep are just goats that have been bred to have smaller horns and more wool. That's it. That's all a sheep is.
Right. Yeah, the explanation for Gene Leitner's mammalian archetypes paper for why they split Bovidae into the different subfamilies rather than leaving it the family like for most other things is, well, people tend to think of them as different. So, yeah, that sounds good enough for us.
It's just completely mask off. We have no objective criteria.
Yeah. And that's in a paper in their journal, in the answers, like the Creation Journal, whatever it is. I don't remember the name. Creation Research Journal, whatever. But that's a paper that AIG published because they're like, yeah, this is legit. Like, what? You guys think this is okay? I mean, for your audience, maybe it is, but you know. So Ramapithecus is an early Pongine. It's not a direct Homo ancestor, but next we are going into the Australopiths because they have the big section on this. So good. Are you guys ready to talk about the Australopithecines?
Yep.
I'm as ready as I'm likely to be in the next few hours.
So not very. All right, got it. What of the next stage, the Australopithecines? These are said to have appeared about 2 million BCE. It is claimed that they were tool makers, but it is admitted their brain was only about a third as large as modern man's. Also, a similar... right, yeah.
It's admitted that this thing supposed to be an ancestor of like Homo sapiens was closer to the common ancestor of Homo sapiens and other apes than Homo sapiens are. Like, yes, that's how that works. Thank you.
Dapper, it was admitted that Australopiths are not identical to Homo, therefore they're not in our lineage. Dapper, I don't know what you want. They're not exactly they're not exactly what we expect, and they're not exactly us. So that
it's every once in a while you get a creationist who's like, these transitional forms are so transitional they can't be transitional, which is like they don't say it that way, but it's what the argument means.
They're too transitional to be transitional. Yeah.
No.
Also, a similar fossil was found by Dr. I think that's Louis Leakey, isn't it? L. Leakey?
Yeah, I would think so. I don't know of any other L. Leakeys, but then again, I'm not an expert.
An expert in leakies?
Or, the history of paleoanthropology or paleoanthropology itself.
A leakologist. In Africa several years ago. They need more commas in here. The New York Times of April 11, 1965 said, quote, an apparent tool user described by Dr. Leakey as Homo habilis, I don't know why they capitalized both of those, is classed by Dr. Robinson and other forms and others. Is classed as a form of Australopithecus. Close quote.
I've never heard anyone Australopithecus habilis. I'm unfamiliar with such claims, but I want to point out, guys, this is a pro tip to creationists, real quick. You want to be taken seriously, learn how to do binomial nomenclature, genus name capitalized, species name lowercase, italicize the whole thing. If you don't do that, you're tipping your hand that you have no clue what you're talking about because you haven't gone through the high school level education it takes to assess this information.
Correct. Yes. Of course, they haven't they don't italicize any genera at all.
No.
They didn't do that for Ramapithecus or Dryopithecus. Yeah, they didn't do it for anything.
It's one of those things where it's just like, look, man, you got to meet the minimum criteria to be taken seriously in the field. And part of that is getting the basics of formatting right. Now, ultimately, does it matter to your argument if you can't format it correctly? No, but the thing is, humans work on these things called heuristics, where if you don't show yourself that you're someone who is likely to be taken seriously, there's no reason for people to look into your actual arguments, and that's what you're doing here.
Right.
Is you're tipping your hand that you don't know enough about the field to be taken seriously. So just do it. It's really easy, right? Capitalize the genus, not the species, put it in italics. That's like 2 rules, maybe 3 rules, depending on how you count them. They're not complicated rules.
2.5 rules. We'll say that.
Basically, yeah.
All right. Quote, returning, then the book, The Primates, declared, quote, these finds provided the basis for the first coherent and satisfactory explanation of how man came to evolve out of his ape-like ancestors, close quote. It took a century of intensive hunting for a few bones that are regarded as the first coherent and satisfactory explanation of man's evolution from an ape-like ancestor. And that's got an exclamation point for some reason. But is it all so certain that the Australopithecines were really ape-like men? Evolutionist Legros Clark cautioned, quote, the term man and human can only be applied to them with some reserve, for there is no certain evidence that they possessed any of the special attributes which are commonly associated with the human beings of today, close quote. Okay, 2 things. First of all, okay, both of these quotations are hilarious. The first one, an apparent tool user described by Dr. Leakey as Homo habilis is classed by Dr. Robinson and others as a form of Australopithecus. So 1, the early Homo is so transitional it might be an Australopith.
Yeah, this is another one of those. It's so transitional it can't be transitional.
That's the first quote. The second one, the terms man and human can only be applied to them with some reserve, for there is no certain evidence that they possessed any of the special attributes which are commonly associated with the human beings of today. Well, okay. And what do you want? Like, okay, that first quote is, I think it's really funny because I think the guy who wrote this book, or guys or gals, people who wrote this book, just it completely, like, the point went over their head of what it's saying. And there are fossils that are like early Homo, which are extremely similar to Australopiths. Because the thing about, so let's talk about the brain size for a second here. Brain size in humans did not jump up, or in Homo, I'll say Homo. Brain size in Homo did not jump up until Homo erectus. So you have Australopiths whose brain size is maybe a slight bit larger than chimps, but it's still fairly small. It's more similar to their brain size than it is to our brain size. And then you have Homo habilis and Homo rudolfensis, whichever one you want to use, which again, still pretty small, but maybe slightly larger than chimps. And then you have Homo erectus, and Homo erectus's brain goes way up.
Mm-hmm. Although it's very variable. Different populations of Homo erectus have very different brain sizes.
Yes, and what we find is it's also associated with their evolutionary history. The earliest Homo erectus have the smallest brains. And then that trend goes up as you go with time. So as you get closer to today, you see this increase in brain sizes. Huh. How weird is that?
Yeah, it's almost bizarre.
It's almost like they're evolving or something.
It's almost like what you would expect to see if you had probably small-brained ancestors and you're a giant balloon-brained species right now.
Right? How crazy? How weird is that? It just makes no sense whatsoever.
I don't know, guys. I think it's time to shut all of this down because you know what? All these transitional forms are so transitional that I can't believe in any of them.
Well, no, I guess we started like 15 minutes late, so I guess we're still good on time. Okay, I don't even know what to say about this passage other than like, okay.
It's not even coherent on its own terms. Is basically what it comes down to.
Right. It admitted that their brain was not as large as modern man's. Like, yeah.
Yes. Congratulations. That is indeed. It's like when people say like, oh, dogs always produce dogs. It's like, yes, as predicted by evolutionary biology. Evolutionary biology would break if that's not what happened.
Right. Isn't it true that we know we're related to Homo erectus? Yeah, we are directly descended as a species like Homo erectus is in our ancestry. Is almost certainly in our ancestry.
It's one of the few places in paleontology where we can make a pretty darn solid case that this species led to this current species, or even just any later species. There's a few others, like the species of genus Thelochnus are almost certainly an ancestor descendant, like chrono species. Like Triceratops, Hortus, and Porsus are almost certainly the same thing. But like for the most part, you'd never make those statements. But this is one of the only 3 instances I can even think of where it's reasonable to make that statement.
Also, fun fact, Triceratops horridus is directly ancestral to modern American bison.
Yeah, bison. Yeah, and bison latifrons.
And bison latifrons. Yeah.
Fun times with creationist paleontology. Now, I will say, I can't actually demonstrate that the horn in question is actually bison latifrons. I can, however, say that there's no way to rule that out because all the work that would have been done to do that wasn't done.
Yep.
And in case you're wondering, Mark Armitage, that's who we're talking about.
It's almost like he's not a paleontologist.
No.
And is not writing paleontology papers.
He's writing microscopy papers about things that he claims are fossil dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And I'm sure his microscope technique is, just perfection. I'm sure he's a great microscopist.
Yeah, right, exactly. Because that's what he was trained to do. He's like a microscopy technician or whatever. So it's like, yeah, I'm sure he's perfect at that. Not the paleontology part.
Right. That's why in real science, you have a paleontologist go get and assess the specimens and then give it to the microscopist. So the microscopist isn't usually the one doing the determination as to what genus you're looking at.
This is definitely Triceratops horridus because I said so.
Yeah. I mean, it was found in a place that had, late Cretaceous outcroppings. I mean, granted, it also had Pleistocene outcroppings, so,
Ruh-roh, spaghetti-o. I do think it says it took a century of hunting for a few bones that are regarded as the first coherent and satisfactory explanation. Okay.
I mean, look, anytime you get the first of something, you can go back to some arbitrary point in the past and say, look how long it was between these things. Oh, great. I don't care. We just found our first Homo floresiensis fossil just recently. I mean, that's like 6 million years from the first humans.
Right.
That's ridiculous. How come it took so long? I mean, what do you want? Things happen, and in the past, the whole past existed before the thing happened. That's not an argument.
Time exists. Repeated.
Can you believe it took 4.5 billion years for this stream to happen? What were we waiting for? I don't know.
I was just sitting on my thumbs the whole time.
Right.
That was the only thing I was doing.
Saying it took a century and a half from some arbitrary point in the past to get to a particular fossil just doesn't mean anything. It's just like, okay.
Time exists. Evolution debunked.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it. All right.
It's like people asking me to think it's a miracle that there's total solar eclipses because I happen to exist at a time when the moon is big enough to do it. It's like, no, that doesn't need an explanation.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else on this page we want to cover?
No, I'm good.
All right, we're gonna do one more, and then we'll rebut that, and then I guess we'll call it. All right. Quote: what of their claimed tool-making ability? Oh Lord! Science of December 13, 1957 contained an article entitled "Australopithecines contemporaneous with man?" ? It stated, quote, J.T. Robinson reports the discovery of 58 stone artifacts at Sterkfontein, Union of South Africa. This discovery is of great interest because this particular breccia also contains... Is it breccia?
I think it's breccia, but I'm not a geologist. But that's how I believe Mr. Wilford has pronounced it.
He is our geology god, so we're going with that.
We actually have a fair few geology types that we have in reserve.
That's true. We do.
We have a strong geology section amongst the science friends.
That's true. Also contains remains of Australopithecines, the early Pleistocene man apes of South Africa. Robinson concludes that the advanced character of this stone industry makes its attribution to the Australopithecines dubious. He believes that the most reasonable hypothesis at the present time is to attribute the industry to a euhominid. That's
never heard
a
that term.
I've never seen before.
I mean, I get what it means, but
right.
I don't. It's weird.
Yeah. Mason thinks that tool making of the complexity shown in the Sterkfontein industry was probably beyond the ability of the Australopithecines, and that it must be ascribed to some more advanced hominid. Close quote. In Science of November 29, 1957, appeared the article Hunters or Hunted. It said, quote, during recent years, Raymond A. Dart, to whom belongs the credit of having discovered the first of the Australopithecines, has written at considerable length about the social life of these interesting and controversial man-apes.
Oof.
Yet the data upon which his deductions are based, and hence his conclusions themselves, have proved somewhat short of convincing to at least some students of human evolution. Cool, I guess. Okay. The evidence advanced by Dart for the deliberate use of fire by these creatures has not withstood critical analysis. Moreover, competent students such as Oakley have ascribed the accumulations of non-Australopithecine bones found in the Australopithecine deposits, we need to shorten that, to the activities of carnivores, including hyenas. Washburn concludes that it is probable that the Australopithecines were themselves the game rather than the hunters. Close quote. Okay. Tool making.
David DB22585 said the dog canine is the man ape's best friend.
That's true. Very true.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Tool usage. So tool usage does actually. Tool usage in hominins certainly predates Homo.
Oh yeah.
The oldest deliberately manufactured stone tools, which are the Oldowan industry, certainly predates the earliest Homo that we have found thus far. So as of right now, that can only mean, given the currently available evidence, that Australopiths were producing stone tools before Homo was.
Yeah.
Which, also, given what we know about Homo, makes complete sense. Like the earliest Homo were also using Oldowan tool industries. Was also using the Oldowan tool industry. Like, that's not a surprise.
Right. And let's say we just take everything that was there at face value, no new discoveries.
Sure.
Coexistence of Australopithecines and genus Homo is not exactly a controversial thing. We know that the latest Australopithecines coexisted with the earliest members of genus Homo.
Yes.
It's just, and the thing is, that's also
and paranthropines.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you actually expect from evolution, right? When groups diverge, the groups that they diverge from don't usually just go extinct, right? That's why even though whales diverged from artiodactyls, I mean, cows and hippos still exist. You don't get to say, if we evolved from Australopithecines, then how come Australopithecines persisted after Homo? Because that's how it works, man. That's normal.
Did your grandparents also live while you were alive?
Some of them.
Right.
Most of them, actually. 3 out of 4.
Yeah, it's like your grandparents went extinct the moment your parents were, or died the moment your parents were born, and then your parents died the moment you were born.
That would be an ineffective way to reproduce.
Yeah,
well, unless you're just having lots of babies. I mean, it works for squid, right?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, it works for extremely R-selected species, but but the analogy remains, right? These other species are still continuing, alongside the new species. Maybe not in the same environment, but they're still alive. They're still around.
Yeah.
And so it's
It's just another way
on
of
the Sith rule of 2.
It's just another way of saying if we evolved from apes, why are there still apes? Basically.
Yeah, it's the exact same argument. It's just a fundamental misunderstanding of how evolution works, and that it's a process of branching and not orthogenesis. This is the 60s. We'd already figured out that orthogenesis was probably not a real thing for 30 years now?
Yeah.
So 30 years ago, it would have been reasonable to say, how is it that given the orthogenic nature of human evolution that we would have Australopithecines persisting after the emergence of Homo? Okay, great. Guess what? Orthogenesis was tossed out. So stop using it as a straw man of evolutionary biology.
They did the same. They pulled the same sort of argument earlier with regard to Hyracotherium, or not Hyracotherium, but one-toed horses and three-toed horses.
Oh,
they were like, oh my gosh, they're living alongside each other. Because they are still functional in their environment.
That's how evolution works. Congratulations.
Yep, they were still living alongside each other. You're just asking, why are there still monkeys? Again, it's like the one joke, but it's the one question. It's like this is the same question, but again.
Yeah, it was not a good argument when you asked about monkeys. It's still not a good argument when you ask it about horses.
Although, fun fact for everybody, there's a guy named Long Story Short, and if you're a long-term watcher of my channel, you're probably familiar with him. Long Story Short made a video about whale evolution, which we repeatedly debunked, and he came back at us, and we had a whole back and forth. He eventually got so dishonest, I just quit. We actually wrote another script, or Nestle really wrote it, that we were going to read and everything, but I was so finished with his dishonesty, with Long Story Short's dishonesty, I didn't want to make another response to him, basically. The thing that he said, he pulled this with I think it was ambulocetids and basilosaurids or something like that. He's like, oh, but there are still ambulocetids around when there are basilosaurids around. How can this be if one is descended from the other? And we responded, okay, this is the monkeys argument. Again, you're just asking, why are there still monkeys? To which he actually responded, I don't understand why that's a bad question.
Yikes.
And that should tell you. And the fact, I want to throw in one more little fact there. He is now one of the spokespeople for the Discovery Institute.
Shocker.
So, all these together should tell you something about the nature of the Discovery Institute.
Well, I have a series coming out soon on the Discovery Institute's one of their spokespeople, Stephen Meyer. So, if you want to hear a 2.5 hour or so long series all about how bad Stephen Meyer is at almost everything, go check out my channel, because that's coming.
Yep. Yeah, he is truly abysmal. And the thing with Meyer, one of the reasons I dislike him so much is how smug he is. It's really the smugness of the DI types.
It's like r/confidently wrong.
Yes. Yeah. It's so frustrating because they all have this air of I'm smarter than you. I was reading a Berlinski paper just the other day, and I think I finally get I had to read it a couple of times to sort of get it, but he didn't understand the fundamental argument that the thing he was arguing against was making. And he was acting like, oh, I'm ripping this to shreds. I'm just tearing it apart. And he claims in his rebuttal, I have no idea where they got this number. And it's like, bro, they said in the paper where they got this number.
You clearly just didn't read the paper.
They explicitly stated, and it was a paper that was written in 1994, I believe, about the evolution of the eye. And this paper was it only takes about 360,000 generations for evolution to generate a camera eye by 1% changes to the dimensions. And it's 1% changes to the height or the width or whatever. And Berlinski just straight up says in his paper, I don't know where this 1% number comes from. It's that's just the rate of change for each of these dimensions. That's it. And you're supposed to be the smart guy, right? Anyway, yeah, it's the complete confidence in how wrong they are. I also co-wrote a script with the Professor Dave about Stephen Meyer and how he's confidently wrong on everything. It really gets under my skin. That's one of the reasons I really dislike that man. But
don't blame you. I also really dislike that man after I went through a whole long speech of his and tore everything in it to shreds. And at the end of it, I was like, oh, yeah, this guy is a piece of crap. This is horrible.
I'm pretty sure, some of the stuff he just has to make up. There's no way he gets it from anywhere. It's he just read something and fundamentally misunderstood it or something.
Yeah. So, or he's being dishonest about it. I do think some of that's in there.
Or he's being dishonest. Yeah. No, I definitely wouldn't put that past him. So wouldn't put it past him. And same for Andrew Snelling is a liar, putting one of his students in front of the geological feature he said didn't exist.
It was 3 different students in front of different examples of the same feature that he was just denying the existence of.
Yeah,
and
no,
also,
there's no way that was accidental. There is no way that was accidental.
Now, he'll also use, so he published a paper, Snelling did, in the Answers Research Journal, which, by the way, he's the sole editor of. So, I'm sure it went through rigorous peer review. But anyway,
right.
he put an article out there in the Answers Research Journal about how confident he is about the Mesozoic, Cenozoic boundary being where the flood boundary is. So anything in the Cenozoic was created by post-flood processes, which are, the same kinds of processes that standard geology tends to, take into account. Mm-hmm. But then also in front of audiences, he'll use Cenozoic fossils from Cenozoic Lagerstätte to argue that you need a global flood in order to get such well-preserved fossils. And it's like, okay, but dude, you don't think this is a flood fossil. You have a whole paper about it. You're the reason that AIG takes the stance that the KPG is where the flood boundary is.
Right.
So you're just lying to me right now. You know that it doesn't take a worldwide flood, because you know this didn't happen in worldwide flood. You know it you think you're right about it. I can't say you know it, because that would require him to actually have justification for those beliefs, which he doesn't. They just happen to be correct by accident.
Yeah, and hence why you titled the video "Andrew Snelling is a Liar."
Yeah,
or videos, because it gets to a point where, like, when you first interact with some creationists, like, at first, they're like, okay, well, maybe I don't know about all this stuff, whatever, and you can sort of give them leeway on some of this stuff, and that's fine. But then as they get more into it, then it's like, okay, there's no way you're not accounting for everything, even though you know about this stuff. You're either disregarding it or you're just misrepresenting it or what have you. I think it's Aaron likes to say you can either be honest or creationist at a point, right? At some point.
Or well-informed. You can get 2 out of 3.
Or well-informed, right.
Honest and creationist. Because you could be an honest and just poorly informed creationist. I think most creationists are in that camp.
Right. That's the first, like, when you first start talking to them is like, they're an honest, but they're a poor informed creationist. And then as they become more and more well-informed, it's like, okay.
They either start to abandon creationism or abandon honesty.
The problem with that is the statement of faith that these organizations have, and that includes any evidence that is in conflict with what the Bible says has to be discarded. This is what they do. And that is the dishonesty. And they're even so proud of it that they will post that on their website for people to read, that they're just going to discard any evidence if it doesn't line up with their already formed conclusion. And
they're very open about their intellectual dishonesty. It's not like they're hiding it.
And if I can point out another sentence that annoyed me, and that's the sentence: "Yet the data upon which his deductions are based, and hence his conclusions themselves, have proved somewhat short of convincing to at least some students of human evolution." This is an argument that they always use. Let the students decide for themselves. Okay, so here's my question to you. If you have a problem with your car, are you going to trust the mechanic, or are you going to ask people who drive a similar car to decide what the hell's wrong with your car? You're going to trust the guy who actually studied the car you're driving in to come up with what is wrong with your car. People do this for everything they encounter in life. They're not asking students to make up their own mind, because guess what? If you do that with your car, it's probably not going to be fixed if you let a student decide what might be wrong with it and fixing the wrong component.
Well, I'm even okay with, like, acknowledging that there are some, like, some experts who don't agree with, like, the analyses or whatever, because, again, this was so early in the game for Australopiths. Like, there's going to be debate over, there's still debate over stuff like, where the heck does Homo floresiensis fit? We're still not entirely sure about that, all these years later.
And you get new debates when new fossils come in. Then you come to the conclusion that a certain fossil is in the wrong lineage, because now you've got clear evidence that it should be in a different place.
What was the one that was found just a few years ago? The new Homo species?
So every once in a while, a new Homo species is just named, and then people argue whether or not it's actually just a different variety of Homo erectus.
No, it's not just a different variety. It was the from the Rising Star caves down in South Africa. What? species was that?
I'm familiar with Rising Star Cave. I don't remember that. This is why you should have had Erica on, but I mean,
she's in isn't she in like Nairobi right now or something?
I mean, I saw a picture from her from Addis Ababa, but I don't think that she's still there.
Homo naledi. Homo naledi. That's what
Naledi. There you go.
Homo naledi is another where I don't know what the consensus is right now, but I remember when it first came out, it has like a strange, it has this mosaic of characters, which made paleontologists be like, okay, well, it could either be like really, like it's either a really advanced, like ancient Homo, or it's a really like primitive, early, later Homo. And it's like, where does it fit exactly? And there was a whole debate over that, and it was hard to figure it out in part because like they hadn't dated the cave comprehensively and all this other stuff. And so I don't know where that debate rests now. Maybe somebody.
It's almost like this is what you would expect to see given the branching nature of evolutionary biology.
Right. Almost. Yeah.
Weird. Yeah. It's weird the degree to which the fossil record of hominins has more and more closely resembled the types of models that we would predict based on the theory as time has gone on.
Yeah.
What do we call that? Like confirmed predictions? Isn't that like the someone's called that the golden standard in science? I believe testable predictions that have been confirmed.
Yes, prediction confirmed. Muscle emoji. Yeah.
We should add in novel testable predictions for anyone who's seen the debate between Tom Jump and Kent Hovind. I think the debate went nowhere because Hovind didn't acknowledge the title of the debate. SFT pretty much screwed up. I would
have expected that debate to go nowhere.
Yeah, screwed up the title of the debate, then confirmed that the debate should be about novel testable predictions, and then backtracked on that because Hovind didn't want to accept that. So if you're going to watch that and you want to know how dishonest creationists are, Hovind made predictions. He didn't make predictions. He made postdictions. He said things that we already know, and I'm going to predict this. Yeah, because you already know that that's going to happen.
Yeah, he did that in that stupid debate he had a long time ago with the 3 professors, which should never have happened in the first place. But he had that whole debate where he's like, I predict we should live in a world with justice and love and unity. It's like, bro.
That's not a prediction. It's not even a retrodiction.
No, it's just an observation. Like, you can't be like, walks outside. Yes, I predict it's not raining right now. Like, no, that's not how that works.
That's not predicting.
Retrodiction is a real thing in science, right? Like, it's not a prediction. But what you have to do for a retrodiction is you have to make sense of previous data that was previously unexplained.
Right.
And then you still have to go ahead and make predictions in order for your retrodictions to really count for anything.
Right.
And what
because it's not just an ad hoc explanation.
No, and what Tom pointed out, that you have to have a novel prediction. You have to come up with something new that is testable and that then can be confirmed along the line. That is what science is all about, not just predictions. You have to come up with something that we don't know yet and then go search for the evidence, and once we find the evidence, that we can confirm our prediction. That is how science works.
Yeah, when creationists quote-unquote predict the current state of the world, it's like, gee, I'm glad that your nearly infinite capacity to engage in post hoc rationalization hasn't been defeated yet. I don't know. That's not impressive, though.
No.
Yeah.
But to me, this debate, it just showed, because at some point SFT confirmed, yes, that is what we should be talking about, because that is what science is all about. And then when Hovind pointed out that he didn't want to make novel testable predictions, he just backtracked and basically gave it to Hovind that it wasn't in the title, so it wasn't Hovind's fault that he couldn't make any novel testable predictions.
Well, I mean, look, we're talking about the man who said Hovind brings in the views, so I don't care that he abused his wife.
Yeah.
So, I mean, are we surprised that
on more than one occasion?
Yeah. Multiple times on record is saying wife beating is okay if you bring me viewers. So we're not exactly talking about the paragon of ethics here.
I would like to point out, if anybody in my audience does have the misfortune of debating Kent Hovind, the first question you should ask him is, when did you stop beating your wife? That should be the very first issue on the docket. Not science or history or philosophy. None of that.
When did you
stop beating your wife?
The second one should be, have you figured out how to define a dinosaur yet?
The fun part is
because that's a question I want to ask everyone.
The fun part is that Hovind will bring this up. When have you stopped beating your wife? When someone asks him a loaded question.
That should be like, oh, when
and
did
your
you?
immediate response to that should be, well, when did you? I mean,
right.
Yeah. Convicted domestic abuser, Kent Hovind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, if his appeal goes his way, I will say that he is no longer a convicted, and he's once again an alleged or acquitted spousal abuser. But as it stands right now, he is a convicted spouse abuser.
Yeah, and there seems to be another lawsuit.
Domestic violence.
There seems to be another lawsuit coming that is even worse than spousal abuse. So
wouldn't be surprised. All right, gang. Let's close this one down. So Dapper, what's going on your channel in the near future?
All right, so Saturday I'm going to be talking about a video called The Flood or like Geological Bias or something. It's a creationist talk that was given apparently in a church, and it's just got the worst takes on like biology or geology and paleontology. It's really
worst?
bad.
Worse than peripherans or sponges?
Well,
peripherans are fungi? I'm sorry.
Okay, but that's not a geology or a paleontology take per se, right?
I guess that's true. That's fair.
But yeah, so I have had a guy that I responded to say that fungi are peripherans. Like, just fungi are sponges, which is extremely not true. That's very, very much not the case. So that's on the 30th. On the 2nd, we're going to be doing Kent with Bent. So we will be continuing our odyssey into the Creation Science Evangelism 201 series, because that is apparently Kent Hovind's super deep dive onto everything he thinks about everything, in which the title of the class usually bears very little relation to what is actually discussed in the class. So for instance, the video we've been going through right now is titled, Is Evolution Compatible with the Bible? We are, I think, about 2/3 of the way through it, and that question has not been addressed at any point in the entire video. Let's see. Thursday, the 4th, is going to be the second and final part of the stratigraphy and the flood, which is my attempt to correct Cindy Lincoln about stratigraphy, and mostly to just try to get her to realize that you can't just look at a picture of strata on the internet and then just declare that it's caused by a flood. Like, not even geologists can figure that out from just a picture. You need to do like actual research, and if it's like geologists have to actually do things like take samples and do tests and look at things microscopically, and just being like, it looks like a flood could have done that. That's not going to cut it. Then Friday should be a speculative evolution video. I've decided to release this one outside my normal upload schedule, and I'm sure that I'll have something or other on the 6th, which is a Saturday. So there you go.
Nice. Peter, what's going on
yeah,
your end?
I want to address Dapper for a second. So it's funny that you should mention Cindy Lincoln. I've recently, I think that I can say it, have become friends with Cindy, and we've been talking back and forth offline a lot.
Oh, good.
And also with Mark Stoney. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's currently.
I am familiar with him. I'm not in contact with him.
Yeah, he's doing 24/7 live streams on Kent Hovind and exposing all of the lies and all of the people who have come out against him. I recently.
It's basically anyone who's ever left the compound is strongly against Kent Hovind.
Yeah,
and he's like, oh, they're all just liars. It's like, man, that's just the Scientology line. Anyone who ever leaves and has negative things to say about us is just a horrible liar. Yeah.
Well,
that seems far-fetched.
So
that's convenient.
Since I'm doing a lot of OBS stuff, I've offered Mark to help him out and to see whether or not we can set him up so he can have some decent streams, because every once in a while he will not have audio on things and stuff like that. So I really want to help him out. And recently I went on one of his live streams, and I don't know how we got there, but at some point Cindy joined and we started talking about evolution. And Mark Stoney now...
That doesn't sound surprising.
Mark Stoney now is stepping away from young Earth creationism, and he is seeing that there is really good evidence for evolution. So it's only small things, but I still see that as a win, that if you can convince people to actually look at the facts. And probably what did it is the dishonesty of Kent Hovind. If he's dishonest on things that happen on Dinosaur Adventureland, maybe he is dishonest about the science that he's putting forward. And I think
seems like Jackson and I might need a conversation with Mark Stoney.
Oh, I'll be more than happy to set that up.
That does sound like a really good idea.
I will be more than happy to set that up. Mark is as far as I can tell, he's a great guy. He's willing to listen. He's a good guy to have a conversation with. So I'll be more than happy to set that up.
That brings up something that I feel like doesn't always come across. I genuinely like a whole bunch of young Earth creationists.
Yeah, me too.
Right? Like, I consider myself friends with a whole bunch of them. This is not something that I feel like we have to make into like a personal thing. Now, there are exceptions, like Andrew Snelling, who is a blatantly dishonest jerk. However, that's not all of them. And so, I think that would be a fun conversation. If we can set that up, I would love to have talk with him and Jackson on my channel or Jackson's channel. Or
absolutely. Yeah. I enjoyed, like recently we talked with Paleo Logos not too long ago. I actually follow him on Twitter now, and I regularly...
his Twitter's on fire pretty often.
Yeah, I positively engage with a lot of the stuff he posts. I don't have any problem with him, with most of the stuff he says. So yeah,
I want to say we shouldn't have, because if we're going to make people our enemies, there's no way that we can actually inform them about modern science. So you have to engage with people, and at least on a respectful level. Apart from people, as you said, Dapper, like Andrew Snelling, who are just lying because it brings in the money. That's probably literally the only reason.
Inspiring Philosophy is another cool guy. We did a response together to a creationist organization, and I've helped him with some other stuff behind the scenes.
Isn't he a theistic evolutionist?
Well, yes, he's not a creationist by any means. I'm just saying he's another Christian that I like.
Okay.
I'm not I may be an atheist, but I'm not like an anti-theist or anything like that. I'm perfectly, content to help like other Christians and even
I think what is
if, I think what is whatever.
Yeah, but I think what is important is
Inspiring Philosophy. He's a cool guy. I like him.
Yeah, I think what is important is that we're not attacking people. We're attacking ideas.
Right, exactly.
Ideas that have been proven to be wrong. Those are the ideas we're attacking. It's not about the person who buys into these ideas, because there are a lot of factors why people end up as a young Earth creationist, and that is probably has to do with their entire life, how they're brought up, the people that they grew up with, their entire environment. So, yeah, I don't think those people are to blame. And if we can reach out and help them, I think we get to a better world. And that's basically what I've been about ever since I joined social media. I mean, I'm friends with a flat earther. And as a person, he's a great guy. He just believes in the most ridiculous stuff that you can actually believe in because it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that he's a bad person. Oh,
right.
I will say I do like that the flat earthers are actually more consistent exegetes given literalism than young Earth creationists.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so exactly right. Attack ideas, not people, and there's lots of people on both sides of the aisle we can be perfectly friendly with, as evidenced by all of us. So
yeah.
And
the last few shows we did on our channel are with predominantly young Earth creationists, and we've had some really good conversations. We also had a guy on who had some technical issues, which I now think weren't actually technical issues. He was trying to cop out, and then he went on Twitter and started calling every woman in the thread a whore. So we had his Yikes. Twitter account taken out, and he's probably back on a different one, but he won't be coming on my channel anytime soon. We do have something that we're setting up right now, which is a university professor who's also a Christian and a very vocal one. So I'm really looking forward to that one.
Okay. Well, cool.
And I'm still not aware whether or not she is a young Earth creationist or not, but we'll see. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Okay. And next week there will not be a show on here on Thursday. That's me saying it right now, because I will not be in my normal place. I'll be out and about in the good old US of A. So not next week, but then we will return the next week. So
seeing what we've talked about, should we warn you about a certain disease carried by monkeys?
I will do my best to avoid monkeys in that area. So.
Be careful.
Generally speaking, avoiding close interaction with non-human monkeys it's usually a good idea.
Yeah,
you really shouldn't be closely associating yourself with non-human monkeys in the wild or feral ones.
Definitely true. Looks over at Erica out in the wild right now with the monkey.
The thing is, I don't think she's gonna be hugging any of them.
That's. I mean, unless they're really cute, I guess. But anyway, all right. Well, thank you everybody for watching. All you guys in the side chat, appreciate all of you. Thank you for coming, Dapper. Thank you for hosting and co-hosting, as always, Peter.
You're welcome.
And we will see you all next time. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. If you want to